November 1918, in the Yukon Territory, I watched a man walk toward his own death with an expression of perfect relief on his face. And the thing that killed him embraced him like a father holding a son who has finally come home. And the sound it made when it received him was the worst thing I have ever heard in my life, because it was not a growl or a scream or a roar. It was gratitude. I have spent 51 years trying to find a way to tell this story that does not make the creature sound merciful. I have failed, because it was merciful. That is the horror. The Wendigo did not chase us. It did not corner us. It did not bare its teeth or howl or do any of the things that monsters are supposed to do. It stood in the red light of a winter sunset, with its mouth open and its arms wide, and it waited, with a patience that had outlasted centuries, for one of us to accept what it was offering. And what it was offering was real. The peace was real. The end of hunger was real. The warmth in a frozen forest at 40 below was real. Private Thomas Dunham walked into that embrace and stopped shivering for the first time since France. I saw his face go slack, and then I saw it change into something I cannot describe, except to say that he looked, in that moment, the way I imagine a man looks when he reaches heaven, if heaven were a pair of arms made of bone and antler, and 4 centuries of starvation compressed into something that had forgotten how to let go. I did not walk toward it. Leonard Yeoward did not walk toward it. We lived, but living cost us something that dying would not have. And I'm here to tell you what that cost looks like when you carry it for half a century in a body that remembers every winter what it felt like to almost say yes. My name is Edward Calloway. I was a sergeant in the Canadian Expeditionary Force 2nd Division, and in November 1918 I was 31 years old and stationed at the garrison at Dawson Creek in the Yukon Territory, which was the end of the world in every direction that mattered, and exactly where the Army put the men it did not want to look at anymore. I want to be precise about this, because precision is the only currency I have. The men assigned to the Yukon garrisons in late 1918 were not heroes on leave. They were not valuable specialists being preserved. They were the broken ones, the ones who had survived the Western Front in body but had left something essential in the mud at Passchendaele or Vimy or the Somme, and whose commanding officers had determined that the most efficient use of their remaining service was to send them somewhere cold and quiet, where their particular species of damage could finish its work without disturbing anyone. We were, in the parlance of the administrative forms that governed our lives, reassigned for convalescent purposes. We were, in the language of honest men, disposed of. I do not say this with bitterness. Colonel Reginald Hearn, who commanded the Dawson Creek garrison, was a decent man who understood that the men under his authority had been used up, and who did his best to give us purposeful work and sufficient rations and the dignified fiction that we were performing a service. We maintained supply lines. We ran dispatches. We kept inventory. We did the work of men who are waiting to be told they can go home. And we did it in a territory so vast and empty that the silence itself felt like a second posting, as if the Army had assigned us not just to the Yukon, but to the specific quality of quiet that accumulates in places where the land has never been interested in human beings. There were 7 of us on the Teslin patrol. I will name them because they deserve to be named, and because what happened to some of them has been reduced to a single line in a military file that says "lost to exposure," and that line is a lie, and they deserve better than a lie. Private Leonard Yeoward, 26, from Kamloops, British Columbia. He had been at Vimy Ridge and had survived by being buried under 2 dead men for 3 days in a collapsed trench section, and the burial had done something to him that the Army doctors called nervous exhaustion, and that I, who had known Leonard since training at Camp Hughes, called something else. Leonard was hungry. Not in the way a thin man is hungry, in a way that had nothing to do with his stomach. He ate his full rations, and then he was hungry. He ate half of someone else's rations, if they offered, and then he was hungry. He sat by the stove in the barracks with his hands on his knees and his eyes on the middle distance, and you could feel the hunger radiating off him like heat. Except it was the opposite of heat. It was an absence so profound that it seemed to pull warmth out of the room around him. He had told me once, on a night when he'd had enough whiskey to loosen the lock he kept on himself, that the hunger had started in the trench at Vimy. 3 days with no food and 2 dead men, and the thought, not the act. He was adamant, never the act, but the thought that the dead men were made of the same material as food, and that the distinction between a man and a meal was a line drawn by the living, and the dead did not care. And he was so hungry, and they were right there, and it would have been easy. He did not do it. He was rescued on the 3rd day, but the thought had not left. He told me it was like a door that had been opened a crack and could not be fully closed again. And through the crack came a draft, and the draft was hunger, and it blew through him at all hours, and he could not find the door to shut it. I listened. I did not judge. I had my own door. My brother William had died at Passchendaele, and I had seen it happen, and the grief had hollowed out a space inside my chest that I could feel when I breathed, a physical cavity where something warm had been and was now nothing. And I had learned to live around it the way a man learns to walk with a limp. The damage was permanent. The adaptation was ongoing. Private Thomas Dunham, 23, from Lethbridge, Alberta. His fiancée, Mary Catherine, had died of the Spanish flu in September, while Dunham was in the Yukon. He had received the telegram on a Tuesday and had gone into the supply shed and sat among the crates for 4 hours, and when he came out, he was a different man than the one who had gone in. The grief had not made him fragile. It had made him absent. He performed his duties with mechanical precision, and he spoke when addressed, and he ate what was placed in front of him. But the part of Thomas Dunham that had been a person, the part that laughed and argued and wanted things, had gone into the supply shed and had not come out. What remained was a uniform with a man-shaped space inside it, and the space was empty, and the emptiness was patient. Private Alan Hargreaves, 29, from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. He had watched his company starve during a supply failure at Amiens. 7 men dying over 11 days while the quartermasters argued about requisition forms. And the experience had rewired him. He hoarded food, he stole food, he hid biscuits in his bootlaces and sugar cubes in his ammunition pouches, and he ate constantly, compulsively, as if his body had decided that the only response to having once been denied was to never stop consuming. He was not fat. The anxiety burned the calories as fast as he could take them in. He was simply always eating, the way some men are always smoking. Not for pleasure, but for the management of a fear that would otherwise be unmanageable. Private James Ogden, 34, the oldest, from Halifax. Quiet in a way that suggested not shyness but completion. He had seen everything he intended to see and was now simply persisting. He had been at the Somme. He did not discuss it. He did not discuss anything. He performed his work, maintained his equipment, and regarded the world with the mild, disinterested gaze of a man who has been to the bottom of something and found it empty and is no longer surprised by anything above it. Private Robert Teague, 25, from Winnipeg. The closest thing the patrol had to an optimist, which in the context of our particular group meant that he occasionally smiled and did not appear to be actively dying inside. Teague had lost his faith at Passchendaele. He told me so directly, without drama, and the loss had left him not bitter, but curiously light, as if the removal of God had also removed a weight he'd been carrying, and he was still adjusting to the new buoyancy. He was kind. He was steady. I liked him. Corporal Peter Ellison, 28, from Revelstoke, British Columbia. My second in command. Competent, reliable, humorless. He had been a surveyor before the war, and he approached the Yukon with professional interest, which made him the most functional man on the patrol by a considerable margin. He did not appear to be haunted by anything, which in our group made him exotic. And myself, Sergeant Edward Calloway, 31, from Esquimalt, British Columbia. Brother dead, heart damaged, functional. That is the list. Colonel Hearn called me to his office on November 2nd and gave me the assignment. A trading post on the upper Teslin River, operated by a man named Gauthier, had missed 2 scheduled radio contacts. This was not unusual, the equipment was unreliable, and the weather was hostile. But Hearn had also received word from a Passchendaele band that had come through Dawson Creek, heading south, that the Teslin man was not right. When Hearn pressed for details, the Passchendaele headman had said only that Gauthier was eating wrong, and that his people did not want to be near someone who was eating wrong during the cold months. Hearn told me this with the careful neutrality of a man who took indigenous testimony seriously but did not know what to do with testimony that did not fit his forms. I appreciated his honesty. He did not dismiss the report. He simply could not classify it. Eating wrong was not a category the Army recognized. I took the assignment. I selected my 6. We departed Dawson Creek on November 4th, 1918, heading north along the Teslin River corridor into 200 miles of boreal forest that had no roads, no settlements, and no particular interest in whether we lived or died. I did not know, as we walked out of the garrison with our packs and our rifles and our various private emptinesses, that we were exactly what the thing in the forest had been waiting for. I did not know that it could feel us coming, 7 hollow men walking north with our doors cracked open, leaking hunger and grief into the cold air like blood into water. I did not know that it had been patient for a very long time, and that patience was the only thing it had left that was still human, and that our patrol was the most promising thing it had smelled in years. I know it now. I have known it for 51 years, and I am telling you because Leonard is dead and cannot tell you himself, and what he endured deserves a witness, and I am the last one left who understands what it cost. We reached Gauthier's trading post on the 9th day, November 13th. The journey had been uneventful in a way that I remember now as suspicious, though at the time I attributed it to good weather and adequate preparation. The Yukon in November is not a place that grants uneventful travel casually. The cold was severe, 20 below at midday, 35 below at night, but the snow was firm, the route was established, and the forest behaved the way a forest is supposed to behave. Animals at a distance, wind in the canopy, the particular silence of a northern landscape in early winter, which is not true silence, but a compression of sound, as if the cold has made the air too dense to carry noise efficiently. Ellison remarked on the 7th day that we hadn't seen animal tracks in 24 hours. Not reduced tracks. No tracks. Even the hares have gone somewhere, he said. And then he looked at me with the expression of a man who has noticed something he does not yet want to classify as a problem. And I nodded, and neither of us said anything further. The trading post was a single-story log structure with a storefront, a living quarters, and an attached smokehouse, situated on a cleared bank above the Teslin River. It had been built in 1903, and Gauthier had operated it for 9 years, trading with the Passchendaele and the occasional trapper. He was, by all accounts, a competent and solitary man, who preferred the company of his dogs to the company of people, and who had survived 9 Yukon winters through a combination of discipline, skill, and what Hearn described as an unreasonable tolerance for loneliness. The post was not destroyed. I want to emphasize this. The image that the word disappearance conjures, ransacked shelves, broken windows, signs of violence, was entirely absent. The trading post was intact. It was clean. It was warm, because the stove was still burning, banked low with coals that suggested it had been fed within the last several hours. But the post was wrong. Every shelf had been emptied, not ransacked. Emptied, with the systematic thoroughness of a man working through an inventory list. The trade goods were gone. The preserved food stores normally sufficient for a full winter were gone. The sugar, the flour, the salt pork, the dried fish, the tinned beef, the rice, the oats, all of it, consumed. I found the empty tins stacked neatly behind the counter, labels facing out, as if Gauthier had eaten through his entire supply, and then organized the evidence with the precision of a man filing receipts. There were hundreds of tins, enough food for one man for 8 months, consumed in what appeared to be weeks. His dogs were gone. Their kennels behind the post were open and empty, and there was no blood and no fur. And I tried not to think about what a man who had eaten 8 months of provisions in 3 weeks might have done when the provisions ran out and the dogs were still there. His journal was on the counter. I opened it and read the final entries while my men searched the building. And what I read was the first thing on the Teslin patrol that I could not explain. And it has stayed in my memory with the fidelity of a photograph because it was the moment the wrongness began and I did not recognize it. The entries from September and October were normal. Weather observations, trade records, equipment maintenance. The prose of a man living a structured life in an isolated place. Then in late October, the tone shifted. Not toward fear, toward wonder. October 24th. Woke hungry, ate double rations. Still hungry, unusual. October 27th. The hunger is remarkable, not painful, almost pleasant, like the feeling before a meal you know will be good. Anticipation. I find myself thinking about food constantly, but not with anxiety. With eagerness. November 1st. Ate all the salt pork today. Should be concerned about the winter supply. Am not concerned. The hunger has a quality to it that I cannot explain, a directionality, as if it is pulling me towards something specific. I find myself looking north. November 5th. Killed and dressed the dogs today. I write this calmly because I feel calm. They did not suffer. The meat was extraordinary, not dog meat, something else. As if the hunger has changed what food tastes like. Everything tastes like the best thing I have ever eaten. I think I understand now. The hunger is not a lack. It is a gift. It is showing me what food is supposed to taste like when you are ready to receive it. November 8th. The handwriting was larger now, looser, almost joyful. Finally full. Walking north. It showed me where to go. I am not afraid. I am grateful. The door is open and I can see what is on the other side. And it is not dark, Ed. It is not dark at all. He had written my name. I stared at this for a long time. Gauthier did not know me. We had never met. The entry was written 3 days before my patrol was even assigned. But he had written Ed. Not Edward, not Calloway, but Ed, which is what the men in my patrol called me, and no one else in the Yukon did. I closed the journal. I put it in my pack. I did not show it to the others. Ellison came to me and said, "Sergeant, the smokehouse." I followed him around to the attached structure. Inside, hanging from the curing hooks in neat rows, was meat. A great deal of meat. Dark, well-smoked, beautifully prepared. The smokehouse was full, and the smell that came out of it when Ellison opened the door was extraordinary, rich, fatty, layered with the complex sweetness of properly cured meat. My mouth flooded. I was suddenly, ravenously hungry in a way I had not been since we'd left the garrison. And I saw the same reaction on Ellison's face. And I heard Hargreaves behind me make a sound that was almost a moan. "It's caribou," Ellison said, examining a cut. "Has to be. Look at the grain." I looked. I did not know what caribou meat looked like when smoked. Not well enough to confirm or deny. The color was dark. The texture was fine-grained. It could have been caribou. It could have been many things. "He's been curing meat while his shelves are empty," Ellison said. "That's not rational." No, it was not rational. But the smell was overpowering, and we had been on trail rations for 9 days, and the trading post was warm, and the stove was lit, and the meat was right there. And I made a decision that I've lived with for 51 years. I said, "We'll eat. Resupply from the smokehouse. Figure out where Gauthier went in the morning. We ate. God help me, we ate. All 7 of us gathered around Gauthier's table, pulling smoked meat from the curing hooks and cooking it on his stove. And I want to tell you that it tasted normal, that it tasted like caribou or venison or any of the common game meats we'd eaten on campaign. But I would be lying. It tasted like nothing I had ever eaten. It tasted the way Gauthier's journal described, like food is supposed to taste when you are ready to receive it. Rich beyond reason. Satisfying in a way that went past the stomach and into the bones. I ate until I was sick. Hargreaves ate until he wept. Leonard ate more than any of us, plate after plate, silently, with the focused intensity of a man filling a hole that had been open for years. And when he finally stopped, he looked at me across the table, and the expression on his face was something I had never seen on Leonard Yeoward. Peace. Ed, he said, I don't feel hungry. He said it the way a man in chronic pain might say it doesn't hurt anymore. With disbelief, with gratitude, with the fragile, trembling hope of someone who has been suffering so long that the absence of suffering feels like a miracle. I should have been alarmed. I was not. The food had done something to my own critical faculties, a warmth, a contentment, a softening of the edges of the alert and suspicious mind that had kept me alive through 4 years of war. I felt good. I felt full. I felt, for the first time, since William died, that the hollow space in my chest was not empty. We slept in the trading post that night, all 7 of us, warmer and more fed than we had been in months. And not one of us asked the question that should have been the first question, the only question, the question that might have saved us. If Gauthier ate everything in the trading post and then walked north, what was the meat in the smokehouse made of? And who prepared it after he was gone? In the morning, I made 2 decisions. The first was to follow Gauthier's trail north. He had departed the post on foot, heading upriver, and his tracks were still visible in the crusted snow, human boot prints, evenly spaced, the stride of a man walking with purpose and no hesitation. Wherever he was going, he knew the way. The second decision was to take provisions from the smokehouse. We loaded our packs with the smoked meat. Enough for a week. I remember Hargreaves handling the wrapped bundles with a tenderness that was almost reverent, tucking them into his pack the way he usually tucked his hoarded biscuits. And I remember thinking that this was the first time I had seen Hargreaves handle food without anxiety. The meat had done something to his compulsion. The desperate hoarding energy was gone, replaced by a calm certainty that there would be enough, that he would not go hungry, that the fear was over. I noticed this. I catalogued it. I did not act on it. The contentment from the meal was still heavy in my limbs and my mind, and the observation floated through my awareness like a fish through deep waters, or visible but unreachable. We followed Gauthier's trail north. The first day was unremarkable. The forest was dense boreal spruce, snow-covered, the river a frozen corridor to our left. The cold was steady at 20 below. Gauthier's tracks were easy to follow. The only notable feature was the continued absence of animal life. No tracks, no birds, no sound except our own breathing and the creak of snow under our boots. Ellison remarked on it again. Like the whole forest has been emptied out, he said. Like something cleaned it. I asked him what he meant by cleaned. He thought about it. Not killed, just moved, the way game moves away from a fire. Not running, just relocating to somewhere more comfortable. He paused. The question is, what made this area uncomfortable? That night, we made camp in a stand of spruce 100 yards from the river. Good shelter, good sight lines, a clean fire. Standard procedure. The men were in better spirits than I had seen them since the garrison. The food had done something to the group's baseline mood, lifting it from the grim endurance that was our default into something that almost resembled warmth. Teague told a joke. Dunham smiled. Yeoward sat by the fire and ate another portion of the smoked meat. and his eyes were calm, genuinely calm. And I thought, maybe this is what he needed. Maybe the hunger just needed real food, good food, enough food. Maybe the door is closing. At 2 a.m, Yeoward shook me awake. Ed, do you smell that? I inhaled. Cold air, wood smoke from our banked fire, the faint mineral scent of frozen river. Nothing else. I don't smell anything, Leonard. Meat, he said. His voice was tight, not frightened, focused, the way a pointer dog focuses when it catches a scent. Roasting meat, rich, Ed. Fat dripping on coals. You can't smell that? I could not. I woke Ellison. He could not. I woke Teague. He could not. No one in the camp could smell what Leonard smelled. And Leonard was standing in the center of the clearing with his nose raised and his body trembling, not from cold, from want. The hunger was back. It had been gone for 18 hours, the longest reprieve Leonard had experienced in over a year. And now it was back, and it was bigger. And it was accompanied by a phantom smell so vivid and specific that Leonard could describe the cut of the meat, the species of wood on the fire, the distance. North, half a mile, maybe less. Someone is cooking, Ed. I should go and... No. He looked at me. The calm from the trading post was gone. The peace was gone. In its place was the old hunger, magnified, sharpened, given direction. It's just someone's camp, he said. A trapper. Someone. I'll just go and see. Leonard, it is 30 below, and we are the only human beings within 100 miles, and no one is cooking meat at 2 a.m, and you are going to sit down. He sat. He sat the way a man sits when every nerve in his body is telling him to stand. His hands gripped his knees. His jaw worked. I could see the tendons in his neck, taut as wire. The smell, whatever Leonard was perceiving, faded after an hour. He slept. I did not. At dawn, I walked the perimeter of the camp. What I found ended the last of the contentment the trading post had given me. Tracks, not Gauthier's, not human. Bipedal, yes, 2 feet. Left-right alternation. The pattern of something that walked upright. But the feet were enormous. Each print was nearly 2 feet long, pressed deep into the crusted snow with a weight that I could not reconcile with any animal I knew. The stride between prints was close to 6 feet. The depth suggested something that weighed several hundred pounds, at minimum. And the prints circled the camp, not approaching, circling. 3 complete circuits at a distance of about 40 yards, each circuit overlapping the previous one precisely, as if the thing that made them had walked the same path 3 times with mechanical consistency. 3 circuits. And then the prints walked north. The same direction as Gauthier's trail. The same direction Leonard had pointed when he smelled the phantom meat. I showed Ellison. He crouched beside the prints and measured them with his surveyor's eye and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Bear? On 2 legs? For 3 laps? In a perfect circle? I don't know, Sergeant." Neither do I. I did not show the tracks to the rest of the patrol. I told Ellison to keep them between us. I did not want Yeoward to see them. I did not want Yeoward to know that something had circled our camp 3 times in the night while he was smelling meat that was not there. Because I was beginning to form a connection between these 2 facts that I did not want to form, and speaking it aloud would have made it real, and I was not ready for it to be real. We packed camp and followed Gauthier's trail north. The bipedal tracks ran alongside it, parallel, sometimes overlapping, sometimes diverging into the trees for 100 yards before returning. 2 sets of prints heading in the same direction. 1 human, 1 not, walking together. On the second night north of the trading post, Hargreaves woke at midnight and reported the smell of cooking meat. This stopped me. Hargreaves, not Yeoward. A second man. I woke the camp. Yeoward confirmed he could smell it too, stronger than before, and from the same direction, north. Hargreaves described it identically. Roasting fat, dripping coals, a sweetness underneath that was almost floral. They were smelling the same phantom, independently, without prompting. I tested the others. Dunham, nothing. Teague, nothing. Ogden, nothing. Ellison, nothing. Myself, nothing. 5 men perceived a normal winter night. 2 men perceived a feast. I sat with this. The 2 men who could smell it were Leonard Yeoward, who had starved in a trench and had thought about eating the dead, and Alan Hargreaves, who had watched his company starve at Amiens and had been compulsively hoarding food ever since. The 2 men on the patrol whose relationship to hunger was not normal. The 2 men who had been broken along the axis of starvation. The 3 of us sat by the fire after the others went back to sleep. Hargreaves was shaking, not from cold. He said, "Sergeant, I've been hungry my whole life since Amiens. Not in my stomach, in my head. Like my brain decided we're always one day away from the food running out, and the only rational response is to eat everything I can while I can. And right now, whatever I'm smelling out there, it's the first thing that's ever been big enough to match the hunger. I want to go to it. I want to find it. I want to eat until the fear stops." Yeoward said nothing. He was looking north. His face was blank. I said, "Leonard." He looked at me. His eyes were wet. "I need to tell you something, Ed. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He told me. There in the firelight, in the frozen forest, 200 miles from anything, Leonard told me the full truth of what had happened in the trench at Vimy Ridge. Not the version he'd told me at the garrison. The one with the careful qualifier. The thought, not the act. The real version. He had been buried for 3 days. The 2 dead men were Private Connolly and Private Marsh. They had died in the collapse, crushed, killed instantly. Leonard was pinned between them in a space barely large enough to breathe. No water, no food, no light. He could feel their bodies against him, cooling, stiffening, and then, after 2 days, softening. On the 3rd day, he bit into Connolly's arm. He stopped almost immediately. He spat out what was in his mouth. He did not swallow. He was rescued 4 hours later, and he never spoke of it. And the wound on Connolly's arm was attributed to debris from the collapse, and no one questioned it. And Leonard Yeoward carried this for 2 years in a silence so total that it had calcified into a permanent structure inside him. A room he lived in. A room with a door that was cracked open and a draft that blew through it. And the draft was the hunger, and it had never stopped. "I crossed a line, Ed," he said. "I put my teeth in a dead man's arm. I didn't swallow, but I tasted it, and something opened in me, and it has not closed. And whatever is out there in the dark right now, whatever is cooking that meat, I can smell it, knows. It knows I crossed the line. I can feel it knowing. The smell isn't random. It's for me. It's finding the frequency of the specific hunger I carry, and it is answering it." Hargreaves was staring at Leonard. Not with horror, with recognition. "You too?" he whispered. "You had the thought too." "I had more than the thought, Alan." Hargreaves was quiet for a moment. Then, "At Amiens, on the 9th day, I cut a piece from Edwards's thigh. Edwards had been dead for 2 days. I cooked it on a tin over a candle. I told myself it was bully beef I'd found in his kit. I knew it wasn't. I ate it, and I've been hungry every second since. 2 men, 2 confessions. 2 men who had crossed the oldest human taboo under the most extreme human conditions, and who had been carrying the secret and the hunger ever since. And something in the forest was answering that hunger specifically, finding them among 5 other men the way a frequency finds a tuned receiver, broadcasting a smell that only they could detect. I did not confess anything that night. I sat with Leonard and Alan, and I listened and I did not judge, because judgment was not what they needed, and because, in the quiet honesty of that firelight moment, I was not certain that I would have done differently in their place. 3 days with no food, pinned against the dead. 9 days watching men starve. I did not know my own line. I hoped I would never find it. But I noticed something that I did not speak aloud. The hollow space in my chest, the one where William used to be, felt warm. Not hot, not burning, just warm. As if whatever was broadcasting the smell to Leonard and Alan was also at a lower frequency, broadcasting something to me, not hunger, not a phantom meal, but a phantom presence, as if my brother were nearby, as if the grief had been heard by something in the dark, and the something had pressed against it gently, the way you press a hand against a window to show someone on the other side that you are there. I pressed back, without thinking, without intention. I leaned toward the north the way Leonard leaned, just slightly, just for a moment, and the warmth in my chest increased, and I felt, for one heartbeat, that William was not dead. Then I pulled back hard, with the full force of a mind trained to identify incoming fire, and I understood not fully, not yet, but in outline, what was happening. Something in the forest was reaching for us, not with claws, with comfort. It was finding the specific shape of each man's emptiness and filling it, just enough, just a taste, the way you bait a trap. Leonard's emptiness was hunger, Alan's was hunger, mine was grief, and the bait was tailored, personalized, precise. I said nothing. I sat with my men, and I watched the fire, and I felt the warmth in my chest recede as I denied it, and the sunny turned down. And the recession hurt, the way pulling your hand from a warm stove on a cold night hurts, and I understood for the first time why Leonard's hunger had never stopped, because the relief of feeding it was so profound that the return of the hunger felt like a wound reopened, every time, without end. In the morning, the tracks were back. 3 circuits, the same distance, the same mechanical precision, and this time, a new detail. At one point in the circle, directly in line with where Leonard and Alan had been sitting, the tracks stopped. The creature had stood still. For a long time, based on the depth and melt pattern of the prints. It had stood and faced them through 40 yards of dark forest, and it had what? Listened? Watched? Broadcast? The tracks resumed. 3 circuits completed. Then north. We followed. On the 4th day north of the trading post, we found Gauthier. I need to tell this carefully because it is the part where the story changes shape. And if I tell it wrong, you will think I am describing a monster, and I am not. I am describing a man in the late stages of something that was done to him by something older than the forest. And the late stages looked like this. He was sitting in the snow, in a small clearing between spruce trees, 23 miles north of his trading post. He had no shelter, no fire, no supplies. He was wearing the same clothes he'd left in. Based on the description Hearn had given me, canvas trousers, wool shirt, fur-lined coat, but the coat was open and the shirt was unbuttoned. And he was sitting in -35 temperatures, with his skin exposed to the air. And he was not shivering. He was fat. I do not mean he had gained weight. I mean he was grotesquely, impossibly fat. A man who had been described to me as lean and weather-hard was now swollen to twice his natural size, his skin stretched and shining, his fingers like sausages, his face so bloated that his features had been compressed into the center of a sphere of flesh. He looked as if he had been eating continuously for 3 weeks, without pause, which, based on his journal and the state of the trading post, is exactly what he had been doing. He was smiling. We approached with rifles ready. He did not react to the rifles. He looked up at us, at me, specifically, and then past me to Leonard. And his smile widened, and he said in a voice that was cheerful and calm and utterly lucid, "You came. I knew you would. It told me to leave the meat for you. It said you were coming and you were hungry and the meat would open the door." I stopped walking. "What meat?" I said, though I already knew. "The meat in the smokehouse. It prepared the meat. For you. For the hungry ones." He looked at Leonard again. "It knows about you. It knew before you left the garrison. It's been waiting for you, specifically. You and the other one." His eyes moved to Hargreaves. "You two are almost ready. You've already tasted it. You've already opened the door. All that's left is to walk through." Leonard made a sound. A small sound, like a man who's been punched in the stomach. "What was the meat?" I asked. Gauthier smiled at me with tremendous patience, the way you smile at a child who is asked where rain comes from. "The meat was an invitation. It doesn't matter what it was made of. It matters what it did. You can feel it, can't you? The fullness, the quiet, the door opening a little wider." "Gauthier, what was in the smokehouse?" "Everything that was in me that I didn't need anymore. It took the parts that were in the way, the fear, the loneliness, the cold, and it turned them into something nourishing, and it left them for you. Because it is generous, Sergeant. It is the most generous thing I have ever encountered. It fed me. It fed me and fed me, and I was never empty, and I will never be empty again." I looked at his mouth. I looked at his teeth. I had been avoiding looking at his teeth since we entered the clearing, because I had noticed, in my peripheral vision, that something about them was wrong, and I had not wanted to confirm what I suspected. His teeth had changed. The canines were longer. The incisors were sharper. The overall shape of his dental structure had shifted, subtly but unmistakably, away from the flat-topped herbivore configuration of a human mouth towards something more specialized, more efficient. The teeth of a thing that was designed to tear. "It feeds you," Gauthier said, softly, looking at Leonard with an expression of such genuine tenderness that my stomach turned. "It feeds you, and you are never empty again. The hunger ends, Leonard. I know that's what you want. I know that's all you've wanted since the trench. The hunger ends. You just have to let it." Leonard took a step forward. I grabbed his arm. The contact broke something. Leonard blinked, shuddered, looked at me with wide, clear, horrified eyes, and said, Ed, I was going to go to him. I was already moving. I didn't decide to move. My legs just started walking." "I know." "Ed, what was the meat?" "I don't know." You know, Ed. Tell me what the meat was." I did not tell him. Not then. Not there, in front of Gauthier's tender, patient, inhuman smile. I told him later, that night, after we had bound Gauthier's hands gently, because he did not resist, because he was cooperative and placid and content in a way that made restraining him feel like cruelty, and put 3 miles between us and the clearing. I told Leonard what I believed, that the meat in the smokehouse was not caribou, that Gauthier's journal described eating his dogs, that the timeline of consumption, the entire trading post inventory, then the dogs, then whatever came next, suggested a progression, and that the meat left in the smokehouse, the meat that tasted like nothing we had ever eaten, the meat that had quieted Leonard's hunger and calmed Hargreaves' fear, and warmed the hollow space in my chest, that meat was prepared by something that was not Gauthier, something that had been guiding Gauthier's transformation, something that had known we were coming, and had set the table for us, with a meal designed to open the door a little wider in the men who were already cracked. Leonard listened. He did not vomit. He did not rage. He sat very still, and then he said, "It's working, Ed. Whatever was in that meat. The door is wider now. I can feel it. The hunger is bigger than it was before the trading post, not smaller. It was quiet for a day, and now it's louder, and it wants me to go back to Gauthier, and it wants me to listen to him, and it wants—" He stopped. "What does it want, Leonard?" "It wants me to understand that this doesn't have to hurt, that the hunger can end, that whatever Gauthier is becoming, it isn't suffering. It's the opposite. It's full. It's warm. It's peaceful. And all I have to do is stop fighting." I held his shoulder. I said, "Then keep fighting." He looked at me. His eyes were wet. "For how long, Ed?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't know that the answer was 51 years. We brought Gauthier south with us. I made the decision to abort the northern search and return to Dawson Creek with the trader as evidence and testimony. He came willingly. He was pleasant company, in the way that a man who has been lobotomized is pleasant company, agreeable, conversational, empty of resistance. He walked steadily despite his grotesque weight. He did not tire. He did not appear to feel the cold. He talked. He talked for 2 days. Constantly, gently, with the patient enthusiasm of a missionary describing paradise. He told us what had happened to him. And I'm going to relay what he said because it is the only direct testimony I have from someone who was inside the process. And because what he described changed my understanding of what we were dealing with from a predator to something far worse. Gauthier said the hunger had started in late October. Not suddenly, gradually, like a tide coming in. Each day a little hungrier than the last. He had increased his rations. The hunger increased faster. He had doubled his rations. The hunger tripled. The progression was exponential, and within a week he was eating everything in the trading post with a desperate, euphoric compulsion that he described not as loss of control, but as the discovery of control, as if his entire life he had been eating wrong, eating too little, eating the wrong things, and now something was showing him what real eating looked like. Then the smell, the same phantom smell that Leonard and Alan experienced. Cooking meat from the north at night. Gauthier followed it. 1/2 mile into the forest, he found a clearing, and in the clearing, a fire, and over the fire, meat. Real meat. Freshly killed, expertly prepared, better than anything he had ever tasted. He ate it. He returned the next night. More meat. The next night. More. Every night for a week, the fire was waiting for him. And the meal was waiting for him. And he ate until the hunger was satisfied. And then he went home, and slept like the dead, and woke up hungrier than before. On the 8th night, the fire was not alone. Something was tending it, something enormous, crouched at the edge of the light, barely visible, feeding wood into the flames with hands that were too long and too thin, and moved with a delicacy that contradicted their size. Gauthier said he was not afraid. He said the creature looked at him, and he felt, and I am quoting him exactly, recognized. Like it had been waiting for me, Gauthier said. Like I was late. Like it had set the table every night, wondering when I would notice that the meal was meant for me, specifically. And now I had finally arrived, and it was glad. The creature fed him by hand. I need you to understand this. The Wendigo, the thing in the forest, the thing with antlers and a mouth that could not close, sat across a fire from a human man and fed him pieces of meat from its own fingers. And Gauthier described this as the most intimate experience of his life. More intimate than any lover. More intimate than his mother holding him as a child. The creature fed him, and he ate, and with each piece he felt something shift, not in his stomach, but in his architecture. His sense of self. His understanding of what he was. The boundaries between Gauthier the man and something larger, something older, something that had been human once and had grown past it, were dissolving, and the dissolution felt like warmth, like safety, like coming home. It showed me what it was, Gauthier said. Before, when it was a man, centuries ago, a man alone in winter, a man who starved, a man who ate the only food available, and the eating did not stop, and thus the growing did not stop, and the hunger did not stop, and now it has been alive for longer than the trees. And it is the loneliest thing on earth, Sergeant. It is so lonely that the loneliness has become physical. The loneliness is the hunger. It eats because it is alone, and it is alone because it eats. And the cycle has been running for so long that the man inside it is almost gone, almost completely consumed by the hunger. But not quite, not yet. And the part that is still a man, that part remembers what it felt like to sit across a fire from another person. That part wants company. That part prepared the meat for you. That part is not a monster. That part is a man who has been dying of loneliness for 400 years, and has finally found someone who speaks the same language. What language? I asked. Hunger, Gauthier said. The language of people who have been so empty that they will put anything inside themselves to make it stop. It finds us. It finds the ones who know what that emptiness feels like. Real emptiness. The kind that changes you. And it offers to fill us. And the offer is real, Sergeant. I am full. I have been full for 3 weeks. The hunger is gone. The cold is gone. The loneliness is gone. I am the most content I have ever been in my life. I looked at his teeth. Longer today than yesterday. Gauthier, what are you becoming? He smiled. The smile was patient and loving, and it did not fit his changed mouth. The same thing it became. The same thing we all become, if we're hungry enough to accept the invitation. That night, Yeoward woke me. Not because of the smell. The smell was constant now. He said it didn't come and go anymore. It was simply there. A permanent overlay on his senses. The ghost of a meal he hadn't eaten broadcasting from the north like a signal fire. He woke me because of something else. His hands. He held them out to me in the firelight. His fingers were longer. Not dramatically, not grotesquely. By perhaps a 1/4 inch. But I knew Leonard Yeoward's hands. I had watched those hands load rifles, deal cards, hold tin cups of bad coffee in cold barracks for 2 years. And the hands he showed me were not the same hands. The knuckles were more prominent. The nails were thicker. The overall proportion had shifted slightly towards something that had more reach and more grip than a human hand is supposed to have. It's starting, he said. Whatever happened to Gauthier? It's starting in me. Since when? Since the trading post, since the meat. Ed, the meat was the vector. Whatever is in the meat, the thing that changes you, we all ate it. But it's affecting me faster because I was already open. The door I told you about. The door from Vimy. The meat went through the door. And now something is growing inside me, and it is changing my body, and I can feel it, and it feels... He stopped, his face contorted. Not in pain, in shame. It feels good, Ed. It feels like being healed. And that's the worst part, because if it felt like dying, I could fight it. But it feels like getting better. It feels like the war ending. It feels like being warm and full and whole. And I have to fight against feeling good, Ed. And I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to fight against my own relief. I held his shoulder. I looked at his hands. I said, "You fight it by remembering that Gauthier's teeth are changing. You fight it by remembering that whatever you're becoming is something that feeds on people and lives in the forest for 400 years and can't close its mouth. You fight it by remembering that the peace is a bribe and the warmth is a trap, and the thing offering it to you is not your friend. It is a man who lost himself and wants you to lose yourself too, so he won't be alone." Leonard looked at me. "And if I can't? Then I'll carry you. The way I carried you out of the trench debrief. The way I carried you through Dawson Creek when you couldn't eat. I'll carry you, Leonard, and I will not put you down." He nodded. He did not look convinced, but he nodded. We walked south. Gauthier walked with us. And behind us, at a distance that never closed and never widened, the tracks followed. 3 circuits every night. The same mechanical patience. The same vast, lonely, hungry attendance. Gauthier escaped on the 6th night. I say escaped, because we had bound his hands and posted a watch. But the word implies effort, struggle, a contest. There was none. Private Ogden was on watch, and Ogden told me afterwards that Gauthier simply stood up. The ropes fell away from his wrists, not untied, not broken, fallen, as if they had lost the ability to grip him. Ogden raised his rifle. Gauthier looked at him with a patient, loving, terrible smile and said, "You're not hungry enough yet, but you will be. Everyone is, eventually." Then he walked north, into the dark, into the trees, moving with a fluidity that his swollen body should not have permitted, his feet barely marking the snow, his direction unerring. He did not look back. Ogden did not fire. He told me he couldn't. Not physically, mechanically. The rifle was fine. His hands were steady. He couldn't because he suddenly understood, with the absolute clarity of a revelation, that shooting Gauthier would be like shooting a man walking toward his family. The certainty lasted only a moment. Then it was gone. And Ogden, who had been the most stable man on the patrol, the man I had classified as not haunted, sat down in the snow and shook for 20 minutes. I did not pursue Gauthier. I could not afford to. Yeoward was deteriorating. Leonard's hands had continued to change. His fingers were now measurably longer. I placed my hand against his on the 7th day, and the difference was clear, half an inch at least. His fingers extending past mine were before they had matched. His appetite had become monstrous. He was eating 3 men's rations and still losing weight, as if something inside him was consuming calories at a rate that intake could not match. His body was burning itself to fuel a process that was not weight gain but restructuring. He was getting thinner while eating more, his cheekbones sharpening, his joints becoming more prominent, his frame pulling taut against his skin like a canvas stretching over a frame that was being quietly resized. And the cold had stopped bothering him. On the 7th morning, he removed his gloves and did not put them back on. On the 8th morning, he unbuttoned his coat. At 30 below, Hargreaves, whose own changes were slower, slightly elongated fingers, a persistent hunger that rations could not address, but no visible skeletal restructuring, watched Leonard with the expression of a man watching his own future. We were 3 days from the garrison. I pushed the pace. We marched 12 hours a day. The men were exhausted, but compliant. The unspoken understanding was that we were racing not against the cold, not against supplies, but against the clock inside Leonard Yeoward, which was counting down towards something that would not be Leonard anymore. On the 9th evening, November 22nd, we were on a ridge between 2 drainages, 14 miles from the garrison, when the forest went silent. I do not mean quiet, I mean silent. The wind stopped. The distant creak of trees stopped. The tiny subliminal sounds of a living forest, the settling of snow, the compression of cold wood, the faint ambient hum of a biome in winter, all of it stopped, as if someone had placed a glass dome over us and removed the air, and the temperature dropped, not gradually, in a single percussive plunge, like stepping from a warm room into a meat locker. I felt the cold hit my face like a physical blow. My breath went from steady vapor to a thick white column. The moisture on my eyelashes froze instantly. I have experienced severe cold on the Western Front, in trenches, in shell holes filled with ice water, and I have never before or since felt cold like this. It was not meteorological. It was directional. It was coming from the north, from a specific point in the forest, as if something up there was so cold that it was radiating absence of heat the way a fire radiates warmth. Yeoward stood up. His eyes were wide, not with fear, with recognition. "It's here," he said. And then it was. It came out of the tree line to the north at the far end of the ridge, and the first thing I registered was the scale. My mind rejected it. The spruce trees along the ridge were 40 feet tall, mature, boreal growth, and the thing that walked out of them was taller. Its head and the grotesque crown of antlers that grew from its skull rose above the canopy, and the antlers were not bone. They were something between bone and wood, branching and splitting and reaching upward like dead trees growing from a dead skull. And the skull was nearly human, stretched and distorted, but recognizably derived from a human template. And the mouth was open, and the mouth could not close. And inside the mouth was not a tongue or teeth or anything that belonged in a living face, but a darkness, a vacancy, an aperture into the specific quality of hunger that had been growing for 400 years. The body was emaciated beyond starvation, every rib visible, every vertebra pronounced. The limbs were elongated, wrong proportioned, the arms hanging past the knees with hands that ended in fingers longer than my forearm. The skin, if it was skin, was gray-black, stretched over the skeleton like dried leather over a frame, cracked and fissured and weeping a dark fluid that froze as it seeped. It looked like a man who had been starved and stretched on a rack for centuries, a man whose body had been pulled apart by the hunger inside it until the body was nothing but a frame for the hunger to live in. It looked, underneath all of it, like a man who had once been human. I could see it, in the brow ridge, in the set of the shoulders, in the way it held its head slightly tilted, the way a man tilts his head when he is listening. It had been a person. The person was still in there, compressed, diminished, buried under 4 centuries of transformation, but present. A coin at the bottom of a well, a face behind a window in a burning house. It looked at us. 5 men on a snow-covered ridge at dusk. The sky behind the mountains was red, the deep arterial red of a northern sunset in late November. The clouds lit from beneath like embers, the mountains black against the fire. The spruce trees were dark shapes, snow-heavy, motionless, and the Wendigo stood among them and above them, and it looked down at us with an expression that I have spent 51 years trying to name, and the closest I have come is patience, not the patience of a predator, the patience of something that has been waiting so long for company that the waiting has become its entire identity. And now the company is here, and it does not want to rush this, because when this is over, the loneliness will return, and the loneliness is worse than the hunger, and the hunger is worse than death. Dunham was the first to react. He raised his rifle. The creature did not flinch. It did not acknowledge the weapon. Its eyes, pale, colorless, luminous, with a light that had no source, moved across us and settled on Leonard Yeoward, and I felt the air between them change, thicken, as if a current had been established, a private channel, a frequency that only the 2 of them could access. Leonard dropped to his knees. I reached for him. He was shaking. Not from cold, he hadn't felt cold in days, from effort, the effort of not walking forward. His body was straining toward the creature with the full force of 2 years of hunger, every cell pulling north. And Leonard was fighting it with nothing but his will, and his will was losing. Ed. His voice was a whisper. Ed, it's showing me. It's showing me what it feels like to be full. Ed, it's, oh God. Ed, it feels so good. I didn't know anything could feel this good. It's warm. It's so warm. And the hunger is gone, Ed. It's completely gone. There's no hunger on the other side. There's just warmth and fullness, and you never have to be empty again. The creature reached out its hand, one arm extending, the fingers spreading, palm up, an offering, an invitation, the same gesture you would make to help someone stand, to welcome someone home. Then Private Thomas Dunham lowered his rifle and walked forward. I don't think Dunham made a decision. I think the creature's broadcast, the warmth, the fullness, the end of emptiness hit Dunham's particular wound. The wound where Mary Catherine used to be, the woman who died, while he was on the other side of the continent, and who left a vacancy in him so complete that he had become a uniform with nothing inside it. And the broadcast filled that vacancy with something. Not Mary Catherine herself, but the feeling of her, the warmth of her presence. And Dunham's body responded before his mind could intervene. He walked toward the creature. He walked steadily without hurrying. His rifle hung at his side. His face was slack. And then, as he got closer, his face changed. The slackness resolved into something else, into peace, into the most profound, total, radiant peace I have ever seen on a human face. The creature embraced him. I watched. I could not move. None of us could move. The cold held us, or the creature's will held us, or our own horror held us. The Wendigo wrapped its arms around Thomas Dunham, arms that could have crushed him, hands that could have torn him apart. And it held him the way you hold something precious, something you have been afraid you would never touch again. And the sound it made, the sound I told you about at the beginning, the sound that was the worst thing I have ever heard, was a low, resonant, vibrating exhalation that I recognized, with sick certainty, as the sound of a hunger so vast that even receiving a man into its arms, was not enough to fill it, but was something, was a drop of water on a tongue that had been dry for 400 years. And the gratitude for that single drop was so enormous that it came out as a sound that shook the snow from the trees. Dunham did not scream. Dunham did not struggle. I watched his body relax into the embrace, the way a man relaxes into warm water. I watched his eyes close. I watched his face hold that expression of perfect, total peace. The creature set him down, gently, carefully. Dunham stood on his own 2 feet. He swayed. He blinked. And then he turned his face north and began walking. And he did not look back. And I heard him humming a tune I did not recognize, a melody that sounded old, older than any song I knew. And the creature turned and followed him into the trees, and they walked together, the enormous ruined thing and the small, calm man, north into the dark. And Leonard Yeoward was still on his knees, and his body was still straining forward, and his mouth was open, and his hands were clawed into the snow, and he was making a sound that was not a word, but was the shape of the word, please. And I knew with the absolute clarity that comes only in the moments when your life divides into before and after, that, if I did not act now, in this second, Leonard would stand up and follow Dunham, and I would lose them both. I knelt in front of him. I took his face in my hands. His skin was hot, feverish, burning, as if the transformation inside him was generating heat, as if the thing he was becoming ran at a higher temperature than a man. His eyes were unfocused, rolled back, seeing something I could not see. The north, the warmth, the promise. Leonard, look at me. His eyes focused, barely. The pupils were dilated so wide that his irises were thin rings of color around black holes. And in the black holes, I could see something reflected, something that was not the red sky or the snow or my face, but a light that came from somewhere else, somewhere inside or beyond. And the light was warm and golden, and I understood that this was what he was seeing, not the frozen ridge, not the creature, not me, but the warmth on the other side of the door, the warmth that had been calling him since Vimy, the warmth that he had been starving for since the trench. He's not yours, I said. I said it to the forest, to the thing that was walking away with Dunham, to whatever intelligence was broadcasting hunger and warmth and the end of emptiness into my friend's dissolving mind. He's not yours. He's mine. You can't have him. I do not know why I said it this way. It was not a military statement. It was not rational. It was not a spell or a prayer. It was the thing that came out of me when every pretense was stripped away, every layer of training and composure and professional distance. And what was underneath was a man holding his friend's face and refusing, through nothing but the brute stubbornness of love, to let go. Leonard blinked. The golden light in his pupils flickered. His mouth closed. His hands unclenched from the snow. Ed, he said. My name, just my name. But he said it the way a drowning man says the name of the hand that pulled him up. The creature, in the distance I could still see it, a dark shape moving between the trees, stopped. It turned. It looked back at us across 200 yards of frozen ridge, and I felt its attention on me, like a physical weight, like a hand pressing on my chest. And in that attention, I felt not anger, not malice, but a sorrow so ancient and so vast that for one moment I understood Gauthier completely. The creature was not evil. It was the loneliest thing in the world, and I was taking from it the only thing that eased the loneliness, and it was letting me because somewhere, under the hunger, under the centuries, under the antlers, and the open mouth, and the body that had grown past all recognition, the man it used to be understood what I was doing. The man it used to be remembered what it felt like to hold someone and refuse to let go. It turned away. It walked north. The cold receded. The silence broke. The forest returned to itself. Sound by sound wind, creak, settling snow, as if the world were remembering how to be a world again. Leonard collapsed against me. I held him. He was weeping. I was weeping. We knelt in the snow on a ridge in the Yukon Territory in November 1918. Two broken men holding each other in the last red light. And we did not speak because there was nothing to say that the holding did not already say. Dunham was gone. The humming had faded to nothing. Teague and Ogden emerged from the trees where they had scattered. Hargreaves stumbled up from a gully to the south. Ellison appeared from somewhere to the east, his face white, his hands shaking, his rifle still raised at nothing. "What do we do?" Ellison asked. "We walk south," I said. "We don't stop." We walked south through the night. I did not permit a halt. The men were exhausted, terrified, half frozen, and I did not care. Every hour we remained in that forest was an hour during which Leonard's door was open, and the thing on the other side was whispering. I could feel it not the way Leonard felt it, not as a full broadcast of warmth and hunger and promise, but as a low-frequency hum at the base of my skull, a gentle, persistent suggestion that we were walking the wrong direction, that warmth was behind us, that everything we were walking toward, the garrison, civilization, the cold, small lives of damaged men, was inferior to what we were walking away from. The hum was subtle. It was reasonable. It was, if I'm honest, partially correct. The lives we were walking toward were not good lives. They were lives of managed damage, institutional indifference, and the slow diminishment of men who had been used and discarded. The thing behind us was offering an alternative, and the alternative, for all its horror, was at least honest about what it was. I kept walking. I kept Leonard walking. He could not walk alone. His body was still running hot, still changing the fingers longer each hour, the cheekbones sharper, the eyes developing a reflective quality in firelight that was not human, and his will was a thread. He told me later that the walk south was the hardest thing he ever did, harder than Vimy, harder than the trench, because at Vimy the enemy was visible, and the direction was clear, and all you had to do was survive. On the walk south, the enemy was inside him, and it was not trying to kill him, and the direction it wanted him to go was the direction that led to the end of pain, and saying no to the end of pain continuously, step by step, for 14 miles required a kind of strength that Leonard did not know he had and was not sure he wanted. I carried him for the last 4 miles. He had stopped walking, not from exhaustion, from the effort of resistance. Every step south was a step against the current of the hunger, and the hunger was a tide, and the tide was pulling him north with the inexorable patience of gravity, and Leonard's legs had simply stopped cooperating. His body wanted to go north. His mind said south. The conflict paralyzed him. I put him on my back and walked. Hargreaves helped. His own changes were slower, the fingers, the appetite, a certain brightness in his eyes, but he was functional. And he took turns carrying Leonard. And between the two of us, we moved Yeoward, 14 miles through a frozen forest at night, while the hum at the base of our skulls whispered that we were making a mistake. We lost Ogden on the march, not to the creature, to the dark. He was walking at the rear, and at some point he was not. We did not hear him fall or cry out. Teague, who had been walking beside him, said Ogden had simply stopped, and when Teague turned back to check on him, there was no one there, not even tracks, as if the forest had inhaled him. We searched for 20 minutes. We found nothing. We kept walking. I have carried the guilt of not searching longer for the rest of my life, but I had Leonard on my back. and the hunger was pulling, and the garrison was ahead. And I made a decision that a man should not have to make. And I would make the same decision again. And I would hate myself for it again, and that is the truth. We reached the garrison at dawn on November 23rd. 5 men had walked out. 4 walked back. Dunham gone into the arms of the creature. Ogden gone into the forest. The 3 men I brought back were myself, Leonard Yeoward, and Peter Ellison. Hargreaves was 30 minutes behind us, and when he came through the gate, he went directly to the mess hall and ate for 2 hours without stopping, and then sat in a corner and wept. Teague had been with us on the ridge. Teague was behind Ellison on the march. Teague was at the garrison gate when we arrived. I marked him present. 2 hours later, when I went to find him for the debrief, he was not in the garrison. He was not anywhere. No one had seen him leave. His bunk was empty. His pack was gone. The gate sentries had no record of anyone departing. Teague was the 4th man lost. 3 returned. 4 did not. And the report I filed, over 3 hours, dictating to a clerk named Perkins, who smoked his way through an entire pack of cigarettes and could not keep his hands steady, was the most detailed and honest account I was capable of producing. And when it was transcribed and submitted to Colonel Hearn, it was 31 pages long and contained everything: the trading post, the meat, the tracks, Gauthier's transformation, the phantom smells, Yeoward's changes, Dunham's embrace, the creature on the ridge. Hearn read it. He read it twice. He called me into his office and asked me, in the quiet, precise tone of a man who already knows the answer, "Sergeant, do you stand by every word?" "I do, sir." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The problem, Calloway, is not that I don't believe you. The problem is that I do. And I cannot send this report to Ottawa because there is no one in Ottawa who will read it as anything other than evidence that you have lost your mind. And if they read it that way, they will discharge you and your men, and your testimony will be destroyed, and whatever is out there will continue to operate without documentation. What do you suggest, sir?" "I suggest that I file a report that says 4 men lost to exposure and environmental hazard, and that I keep your full account in my personal files, and that we both accept that the Army does not have the vocabulary for what happened to your patrol, and that forcing the vocabulary will not create understanding. It will create dismissal." I agreed, not because I wanted to, because Hearn was right. The truth required a recipient capable of receiving it, and the Canadian military in 1918 was not that recipient. And forcing the truth into a system that could not process it would result not in acknowledgement, but in the destruction of the evidence. Hearn filed the short report. He kept my testimony. He wrote a personal memorandum recommending that the Teslin River corridor above the trading post be restricted from patrol and survey activity until the environmental hazards can be properly assessed. The memorandum was acknowledged and implemented without fanfare, because restricting access to 200 miles of empty Yukon forest required no justification beyond harsh conditions, and no one in Ottawa cared enough to ask what the conditions were. Leonard Yeoward was placed in the garrison infirmary for 2 weeks. I visited him every day. The changes slowed, stopped. On the 3rd day, his fingers measured the same as the 2nd day. On the 5th day, the reflective quality in his eyes dimmed. On the 7th day, he reported that the smell was gone. On the 9th day, he felt cold again. The cold made him cry with relief. He pressed his bare hands against the frost on the window and held them there until they were numb, and he said, "Ed, I can feel it. I can feel the cold. It's real. I'm real." The transformation reversed, or stalled, or was overcome. I do not know which. I only know that the Leonard Yeoward who walked out of the infirmary after 2 weeks was recognizably Leonard Yeoward. Same height, same build, same hands, same flat human teeth. Whatever the meat had started, and the creature had amplified, Leonard's body had fought it to a standstill, And whether the victory was physiological or spiritual, or simply the result of a will strong enough to reject a transformation that felt like mercy, I cannot say. Hargreaves recovered similarly, though his process was faster and less dramatic. His compulsive eating returned the old anxiety, the hoarding, the fear of starvation. He told me he was grateful for it. "The fear is mine," he said. "It's a human fear. I'll take a human fear over whatever that was." I took my own inventory. The hollow space in my chest, the William-shaped vacancy, was still there, still empty. But it was mine again. The warmth that had pressed against it in the forest was gone, and in its place was the familiar cold of grief, ordinary and human and manageable. And I have never been more grateful for grief in my life. Leonard Yeoward was discharged from the Canadian Expeditionary Force in March 1919. He moved to Kamloops. He married a woman named Helen Marsh in 1921. He worked as a carpenter. He built houses with the hands that had almost become something else. And those hands held his children and sanded wood and poured coffee every morning for 50 years. He never ate meat again, not once. His family believed he was an eccentric vegetarian. Helen accommodated it with the uncomplaining adaptability of a woman who understood that her husband had been in the war, and the war had left marks that did not require explanation. She did not know that Leonard's refusal of meat was not a preference, but a fortification, a daily, deliberate, non-negotiable refusal to taste anything that might remind his body of the flavor that had opened the door. He ate bread, vegetables, cheese, eggs, fruit, grains. He ate well. He was, by all external measures, a healthy and contented man. I saw him every year. I drove to Kamloops from Whitehorse every July. We sat on his porch and drank coffee and talked about nothing, weather, hockey, the business of building things, and neither of us mentioned the Teslin Patrol, except once, in 1947. When Leonard's eldest was inside and we were alone. And Leonard said, without preamble, "It asked me again this morning, Ed. The hunger? Not the hunger. The offer, the warmth. It comes in winter, when the cold is deep and the house is quiet. It comes and it shows me what I could feel. And it's patient, Ed. It's so patient. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't push. It just shows me the warmth. And then it waits. And I say no, and it goes away, and the next morning it comes back. Every day since 1918. I sat with that. 29 years. Every morning. The thing in the forest, or the seed of the thing. The residue left by the meat and the broadcast and the 2 minutes on the ridge, when Leonard's door had been blown wide open, reaching out to him, offering the end of hunger, the end of cold, the end of the emptiness that had lived in him since Vimy. And every morning, Leonard saying no. "How?" I asked. Leonard looked at me. He smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of a man who has been lifting a weight for a very long time. "I think about your hands on my face," he said. "On the ridge. I think about your hands and what you said. And I remember that someone wanted me to stay. And the wanting is enough. Most days, the wanting is enough." He went back to his coffee. We did not speak of it again. Alan Hargreaves died in 1953 in Moose Jaw. Heart failure. He had never stopped hoarding food. His house, when his children cleared it, contained 6 months of preserved provisions in every closet. They thought it was a war eccentricity. It was a barricade. Peter Ellison returned to surveying. He worked for the British Columbia provincial government for 30 years, mapping land that other men would settle and build on. He never surveyed north of Prince George. He retired in 1949. He did not attend reunions. He did not answer my letters. I believe the ridge broke something in Ellison that was not the same thing. It broke in the rest of us. Not a door opened, but a certainty destroyed. The certainty that the world was measurable, and that measurement was sufficient to contain it. Ellison had built his life on precision, And what he saw at dusk on November 22nd, 1918, was not precise. It was vast and old, and it did not fit his instruments. And I think the failure of his instruments was more devastating to him than the creature itself. Robert Teague was never found. He is listed in the military records as lost to exposure, November 23rd, 1918. I do not believe he was lost to exposure. I believe he walked north. I believe the creature's broadcast found the specific shape of Teague's emptiness, the God-shaped vacancy that had opened at Passchendaele and filled it with something. And Teague, who had been curiously light since losing his faith, was not heavy enough to resist the pull. James Ogden was never found. His record matches Teague's. I have no theory about Ogden. Ogden was the man I understood the least and lost the most completely. He is a silence in the story that I cannot fill. Thomas Dunham is not dead. I do not have evidence for this claim. I have instinct, and the instinct is this. The creature did not kill Dunham. It received him. It embraced him. And the embrace was not consumption, but communion. And Dunham walked north under his own power, humming a melody I did not recognize. And whatever he is now, whatever 20 or 30 or 50 years of transformation have made of him, he is out there, in the forest, north of the Teslin River, walking with the creature that found him when he was empty and filled him with something that was not human, but was, in its terrible way, a love. Leonard Yeoward died on April 14, 1969, in Kamloops, British Columbia. He was 74 years old. He died in his bed, in his house, in the town where he had built things and raised children, and said no every morning for 51 years. His son David came to see me in Whitehorse 3 weeks later. He brought me an envelope, sealed, my name on the front in Leonard's handwriting, shaky but clear. I opened it at my kitchen table. One piece of paper, one sentence. I can still hear it offering, Ed. I never stopped being hungry. 51 years, 18,615 mornings. Each one, the offer. Each one, the warmth. Each one, the promise that the hunger could end, that the cold could end, that the emptiness could end. If Leonard would just say yes. Just once. Just this morning. Just today. And each one, no. Leonard Yeoward was the bravest man I have ever known. Not because he faced the thing on the ridge. Not because he survived the Teslin patrol. Because he fought a battle every single day for 51 years. In a kitchen in Kamloops, with a wife who didn't know, and children who couldn't understand. And he won. He won every day. 18,615 victories, unwitnessed, unrecorded, unmedaled. The longest sustained act of courage in the history of any war I am aware of, and no one will ever know it except me and now you. I burned the letter, as he would have wanted. But I want to tell you one more thing, because this story is not complete without it, and because Leonard's honesty demands my own. I feel it too, not the same, not as loud, not every morning, but present. A small, quiet version of the same hum that lived in Leonard for half a century. The residue of the meat I ate at the trading post. The echo of the warmth that pressed against the William-shaped space in my chest when I leaned north for one heartbeat in the firelight and felt, for one moment, that my brother was not dead. The door in me was never as open as Leonard's. The draft that comes through is thin, almost imperceptible, easy to mistake for ordinary winter melancholy or the common grief of an old man who has outlived everyone he loved. But it is not ordinary. It is not common. It is specific and directional, and it comes from the north, and every winter, when the cold deepens and the dark stays long, I feel it stir not as a voice, not as a smell, not as a vision of warmth and fullness, and the end of all emptiness, but as a question, a single, patient, ancient question that I have never answered and never will. What would it feel like to finally be full? I sit by the window. I look north. I feel the question press against the glass, and I remember Leonard's hands clawing the snow and his face in my hands, and the sound I made when I said he's mine. And I hold on to that memory the way Leonard held on to it for 51 years. Because that memory is the answer. Not a noble answer, not a philosophical answer, a stubborn, human, insufficient answer that amounts to nothing more than, I would rather be empty and here than full and gone. It is January, the cold is deep. The lights are off because Margaret is dead, and there is no one to keep them on for. And the question is at the window, and I am old and tired, and the emptiness in my chest has been there for 54 years, and I would be lying if I told you I've never been tempted. But I have Leonard's example. 18,000 mornings, 18,000 refusals. If he could do it hungry, tired, alone with a secret that would have driven lesser men into the forest, then I can do it. For however many mornings I have left, I can sit in this kitchen and drink my coffee and feel the cold that means I am still human, and answer the question the same way every time. No, not today, not this morning, not ever. But I hear it. God help me, I hear it. And in the worst hours of the longest nights, when the cold is so deep that the windows frost from the inside and the house creaks under the weight of the silence, I wonder about Dunham. I wonder if the humming has stopped. I wonder if the peace on his face has lasted. I wonder if, somewhere north of the Teslin River, in a forest that no one patrols and no one maps and no one remembers, Thomas Dunham is warm. And I wonder if that is the cruelest part. Not that the creature offers suffering disguised as peace, but that the peace might be real. That Dunham might genuinely be warm and full and free of the grief that was killing him. That the creature's mercy might be actual mercy. And the only reason to refuse it is the stubborn, irrational, magnificent insistence on remaining what you are broken, cold, hungry, human rather than becoming something else. Leonard chose human. Every day he chose human. I choose human, but I hear it. I hear it. Sergeant Edward Calloway, recorded testimony, January 1969. Whitehorse, Yukon Territory. Filed by personal request. Recipient, none. Purpose, witness.